Hello everybody, welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
Although Monday, after no Premier League football, means our ranks have not gotten worse over the weekend.
That's good. They definitely weren't going to get better, were they?
They might get worse on Thursday. Chelsea, Fulham. You've got Mitrovic and Pereira.
Probably get worse next week
playing.
Following yesterday's announcement confirmed that Crystal Palace and Manchester United will now play next Wednesday in game week 20. So there's a double for Palace, which looks horrendous. It's just another shit fixture thrown into Crystal Palace's horrendous January to March schedule anyway. Obviously, United's double is now more appealing of City at home and Crystal Palace away. We're not going to talk about it too much on this one because what we're going to do is...
Got a bit of time anyway.
We're going to do a whole podcast on Thursday, kind of update on chip strategy, potential doubles and stuff once we've got the Carabao Cup quarterfinals out the way and we've got the full picture going into game week 20. There shouldn't be any more games arranged for game week 20. So the 4 teams, City, Tottenham as well, that should be set. We're going to have a proper long conversation about it on Thursday in terms of planning ahead.
And you mentioned the Cups. We've made this episode today on a Monday, a people's poll. There were 3 options, one clear winner in the end as well, which is about the Cups. So do you want to give us an idea on the options and then what we're going to be chatting about today?
The 3 options were a Premier League team of the season, which I thought might be a nice suggestion as we are technically...
I thought that would win.
I don't know if it's fantasy related as such. But I thought, look, we're halfway. Let's have a discussion. And I will be doing so for our advanced and intermediate tier patrons tomorrow. That didn't win. Neither did the idea, which was a very open conversation of 10 talking points from the FA Cup weekend, some of which we may touch on now. But I guess it saves us having a 10-minute conversation about my rage at Wolves' disallowed goal on Saturday night because there weren't cameras at Anfield that could spot if the goal was onside or offside, so they had to stay with the on-field decision. So even when VAR's in use, it doesn't always work, unfortunately. That really vexed me. So the idea was to have several talking points from the FA Cup weekend gone, but you didn't vote for that either. What you did vote for was the future of domestic cup competitions. And obviously when we say domestic cup competitions, we are referring to cup competitions in England, the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup, and very briefly we're going to touch on the Community Shield on this podcast.
We should probably apologise to the lower league fans. The Johnston's Paint Trophy...
we can talk about that. It's actually the Papa John's these days.
Is it Papa John's?
Or as me and the patrons like to call it these days, the Pizza Cup.
Pizza Cup.
Which is a lot
Milk
easier
cup,
to say
pizza
than the
cup,
Papa John's.
Food cups, yeah, fine.
Yeah, why not? The Pizza Cup seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Which most in the EFL would abolish, but the clubs need gate receipts, which is part of this conversation. On Friday, there was a meeting, Suj, between chairs of the Premier League, the FA, and the EFL. And that's very, very rare that happens. And there were 2 primary reasons for this meeting. One is about the idea of obviously regulation of football and the EFL looking to get...
finances of football.
Yeah, EFL
this
looking to get...
independent body that the government talk about.
More confirmed structural payments from the Premier League through and down the football pyramid. This isn't a conversation that's going to end in a day or 2, and we will certainly come back and talk about it. The other part of the conversation is the restructuring of the scheduling of our football calendar season. And that's now a kind of stage of urgency where something needs to be agreed on, not in the next month or 2, but I would say certainly by the time we get to the end of this year. And the reason it is essential that the domestic football calendar is discussed is because of the revamp of the European competitions. From 2024-25, we have this Swiss model Champions League, which means that it's a 36-team competition rather than 4 groups of 8 as is current. It will
8
be
groups
1.
Of 4, but yeah, I know what you mean.
That's the one, Suj. Thank you. 8 groups of 4, or even 9 groups of 4, because there'll be 4 extra teams. It's going to be 1 league format. The original proposal was that each team would have 10 group stage fixtures. That has been reduced to 8, but obviously that is 2 more fixtures than currently is on the calendar. And the plot thickens because that format is also going to be used in Europa League and it's also going to be used in the Europa Conference League. With a slight twist in the Conference League, it'll only be 6 fixtures, Suj, rather than 8. So actually same number of fixtures in that competition. The issue is UEFA want to spread the group stage of their competitions not over 8 weeks, Suj, over 12.
Right.
So what they want to do is, for the Champions League teams, they will have 8 fixtures, but those will be spread over 10 weeks. So there will be 2 midweeks. Let's just say Man City are in the Champions League. There will be 2 midweeks during the Champions League fixtures that they don't have a game. Mm-hmm. Make sense?
Yep.
But they also want 1 week that is dedicated just for Europa League football, and they want 1 week that is dedicated just for Europa Conference League football. So they want, between start a competition, presumably September, maybe even the end of August, up till whenever the group stage ends at mid-December normally, 12 mid-weeks are going to take up part of the calendar. So from a Carabao Cup perspective, you tell me how the clubs in Europe are going to play.
Well, there's no midweeks is my conclusion all of a sudden, because they don't want any domestic football. I don't think they care too much about the Carabao Cup. And if it's a couple of championship sides or lower league, but they don't really want domestic football clashing with European football, especially if it involves clubs within Europe. So, for example, that week where it's just the Europa League, they won't be happy with the Champions League clubs playing any rescheduled Premier League games or Carabao Cup games. They won't want that, which is annoying. But
just think about it logically, that let's just say in the third round of the Carabao Cup, City and United are both in the Champions League and they draw each other. When are you playing that game of football?
That I'm not sure when you would, unless you ask them to play.
Could you be lucky enough that they would both have a midweek off? You can bet your life that when City have a midweek off in the Champions League, that the other 3 English teams will all play. You can bet that, can't you? Or even if City drew, let's say West Ham are in Europa League, well, presumably West Ham are going to have that week where they're individual.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a mess. You certainly wouldn't be able to play the whole third round of the competition at the same time. And this has happened in the past where Champions League was split back in the early noughties and stuff, where you might have teams in Europe would play their third round tie on one League Cup week, and those in Europe would play it on a given free midweek, for example. The schedule used to have more flexibility, but that's a bit messy, to be honest. And you're always going to have teams that are constantly in a catch-up phase. So what do we do? Any ideas?
It's a problem. It doesn't take into consideration no one cares about the Carabao Cup, do they?
Those are winning.
When I say that, I mean the people that are organising football schedules and people that are at the top end of the FA or the Premier League or whatever. Do they care about the Carabao Cup that much?
Well, the problem is, the winners, I don't know what the current prize pot is, but it's not massive. I think when Man City beat Villa a couple of years ago, their prize was £300,000. Which doesn't even pay Erling Haaland's wages for a week, does it?
No.
I mean, it's so Mickey Mouse in terms of, but there's no financial reward. And even the reward for winning that now is you go into Conference League. You don't even go in Europa League. Now, commonly, the team that wins it finishes high enough that it just drops down to a league position placing. But that's your reward for winning it technically now. If Leicester are unlikely to qualify again for Europe this year, but should they win the Carabao Cup, it's Conference League next year. That's the reward. It's not even Europa League. So do the clubs care about it? No, but there is a limited amount of trophies that can be won in a football season, and it's getting harder to win one.
This is the issue with trophies in general, right? When we go into a season, most clubs can only win one of 3. There's a handful of clubs that are in Europe that could win one of 4, but let's be realistic. The Premier League is out of your club and my club's reach, really. As much as you want to start the season thinking anything can happen.
It's trying to piss me off now.
It's out of reach. So now you're down to...
You'd have said it was out of Arsenal's reach in August.
True, but you're playing the percentages here, right? As a general, you're going to say the odds are very, very slim.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And And for you guys in Europe, that competition also is out of reach. We're in a crapper European competition in the Conference League, so maybe it is within reach. I'm trying to remember when, if ever, we have been favourites for a competition. Like, it doesn't happen for us. We're never favourites for a competition. You said we were for the Conference League.
I think you were at one stage in Europa League last year.
But that's when it got down to like four teams or something.
You pissed that up the wall as well.
Well, so realistically, the European competitions, there's only one or two clubs from England or the UK that can actually win it. So then you're down to the only two realistic competitions is the FA Cup and the League Cup. The League Cup being the most likely because teams rotate heavily where you think you might be able to win it, and then the FA Cup. But then the FA Cup is full of giant killings, and as you get towards the last 2 or 3 rounds, the quarters, the semis, people start playing stronger teams. So you're right. It's just harder and harder to win a competition. Like, if you'd said to me, you could have the League Cup and finish 17th, I would take it right now because I'd like the trophy. But I'd rather, if you said you could have the League Cup and 18th, I'd say no thanks. Keep your League Cup.
I think for the sides that are in Europe, the domestic cup competitions, i.e. the League Cup and the FA Cup, don't really kick into gear till we hit the quarterfinals. No. Like, for those in the Carabao Cup, it probably feels like it starts now, this midweek. Maybe even for City, it doesn't even feel like it till maybe the semi-final, perhaps even depending on who they draw in the semi-final. Newcastle fans will certainly be very up for their tie against Leicester because it's been so long since they've won a trophy.
And they're not in the FA Cup anymore.
After losing at Sheffield Wednesday at the weekend. But for the majority, it doesn't really feel like it kicks in. A regular comment I hear from people these days, if you're going to go out, you might as well go out early. That was my comment when we lost to Forest in the League Cup. It's like, if you ain't going to win it, get me out of it now, kind of thing. And Chelsea fans who've unfortunately obviously drawn Man City away in both domestic competitions, are obviously out of both, and that's their comment. Well, if you're not going to win it, you might as well get out straight away, focus on the league, focus on Europe, etc. In terms of what happens to the Carabao Cup, once we hit this Champions League reform in 2024, part of the dialogue and discussion at the moment is believed to be to potentially enable the clubs that qualify for Europe to field development, i.e. under 23, under 21 teams up till the semi-final period. Semi-finals would probably be in January and the final would be in February probably, where the schedule would allow those clubs in Europe to compete again with their stronger teams should they want to. We mentioned the Pizza Cup. This is what happens in that, right? That's been diluted massively because we allowed development teams from the Premier League and the Championship to compete in the EFL trophy, which is to no benefit of anybody in League One and League Two. It may be of small benefit to some of the Premier League clubs in terms of development of young players playing men's football, but no one likes it.
No.
Who wants to see a Carabao Cup tie between Leicester City, who haven't qualified for Europe, and Tottenham Hotspur's development team? Who wants to see that?
I was going to say Jed Spence, but I still don't think he'd get a game.
He still wouldn't play.
I still don't think he'd get a game. It does dilute. I'm all for young talent being given the opportunity to break into the first team and that kind of thing. It is a problem where you've got young players that are not getting enough game time and that could make it, but because of players that have been bought in, or we're always looking for the ready-made article, they're not getting enough game time. And if there's tournaments that allow them to do that, then great. And I'm talking about at first team level, but not boys against men situations that we kind of create, right? It happened to us in the last round of the Europa League last year when Zagreb came to us, and it happened again where we're going to field a team of kids. And actually, you know what? There's a certain niceness to seeing like 8-9 youth academy players all playing together, representing the club. They've come through together. You think, you know what, good. At least they're seeing that they can potentially make it. There's a very different thing.
Yeah,
that game didn't matter.
A major
the
difference
game
between
was non-competitive.
Even that, right, where you're referring to a game for West Ham in Europa League last year, where you started 6 kids or so, and you still had a few experienced heads and stuff. We are literally talking about the under 23 squad. No first team player involvement. We are talking the kids team, the Premier League 2 team, for example. That no one wants to see that.
No.
And yet Sky'd still put Man United on the TV.
Probably. You know, the situation in Spain where the B teams are playing in the lower leagues and that kind of thing, it's opening the door to that as well, isn't it, really? And I don't like that.
Something that the Premier League clubs would potentially want is that they'd enter that at League 2 or so, or a fifth league has been mooted, which we mentioned in the past, perhaps regionalised League 2 North and South if it was to become a 5-division tier. That's a conversation for another day. Surely the solution here is just to say that the teams qualify for Europe don't enter the Carabao Cup, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it as simple as that?
Yeah.
And this is what I've been wondering. Why is no one putting that forward and suggesting that the teams in Europe clearly don't have the fixture calendar to do it, take them out of it, and give some of the clubs who don't win a trophy, who would be desperate to win one, give them a greater opportunity of winning a trophy and then qualifying for next year's European competition. Surely
what you mentioned there in terms of prize money being so low and so poor, who's going to want to sponsor the competition if you suddenly take out 6 or 7 of the biggest names in English football? No one.
Major headache.
No one. If go from Papa John's to I don't know.
But then the sponsorship reward for it isn't huge anyway, right? What do you get for finishing 20th in the Premier League? It's like 95 million or something, isn't it? In terms of...
Well, if you include all the TV money and maybe...
No, I think that comes on top as well. Whereas you get, 300 grand for winning the Carabao Cup. So, I don't know, but you're certainly right. Who would...
20th in the Premier League, surely.
Yeah, mate.
Prize money?
Yeah, it's mad, mate.
Nah.
All right, go and look at it afterwards.
Googling.
Go and Google it while I talk. You are right, though. The sponsorship of the competition certainly would be... Who would want it? Who would want to sponsor a competition that doesn't have Man United, Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, etc.? Let's assume those teams and Newcastle going forward are going to be the regular 7 that qualify for Europe, if you will. Who does want to sponsor that if they're not in it? Or even worse, who wants to sponsor it if their development teams is going to be what's fielded in the competition? How do we even feel about development team? What if the development team does well and it gets to the semi-final and then we go, oh, hang on, yeah, we've got a chance of winning that now. Let's go back to our strongest team. That doesn't feel right. Remember back in the day when Wenger always used to play the kids? But he stuck to it, didn't he? Like all the way through, get to the semi-final and Arsenal fans would be like, try and win it now. And he'd be like, no, these kids got to this stage. They deserve to keep playing. Even when the final against Chelsea in, I want to say 2007. Still, we started like, it was a mix and match, but like 6 or 7 kids started that final. We'd played like all the way through the tournament and stuff. And you kind of hope if a development team got to the semi-final, you'd give them the chance to keep playing. But then, say if it was my team or Newcastle who haven't won a trophy for absolutely ages, you could feel the pressure going, get the first team on the pitch. Get
that trophy in the cabinet.
Exactly that.
It's 2.2 million, James, for bottom.
What do you mean it's 2.2 million?
In the Premier League.
For what?
Merit prize money. 2.2 million.
You throw the TV on top and all that.
Well, then it's more, but then it goes up by...
I think it's like 90 million to finish bottom TV money.
2.2 million, it increases per league position.
Right, yeah.
So if you come top, you're 44 million in prize money.
It's not bad for a day out, is it?
Well, yeah.
Let's put it that way then. So you get 2.2 million even still for finishing bottom of the Premier League. You get 300,000 for winning the Carabao Cup. Okay. We can equate it that way at least. Then you got the TV money on top, which is wildly different from Premier League again to Carabao Cup. The reason why I think development teams are being spoken about rather than the idea of just pull these teams out seems the obvious solution is actually goes back to an agreement when the Premier League was formed. That part of the agreement of that, because the Premier League was breaking away from the Football League, remember it was the old Football League Division 1, was a contractual agreement that Premier League clubs would enter the Football League Cup, what we now know as the Carabao Cup. A contractual agreement. In essence, if they don't compete in it, they're in breach of their playing conditions.
Right.
So unless that is altered, you can't just pull them out. So there needs to be a rewriting of the rules. And this might be part why they're sitting down as well and saying, look, we need to rewrite this potentially. But as it stands right now, the clubs would be forced to enter a team. Remember we had that a couple of years ago where Liverpool played 2 days running?
Two games,
Club
2 teams.
World Cup final, and they threw like an under-18 team out at Villa in a League Cup quarter final, didn't they? We don't really want that sort of situation.
No.
I think if they can rewrite the rules and just pull the clubs out that qualify for Europe, that's got to be the solution. What you're also doing with that as well is you're guaranteeing a new team in European competition the next season, which gives other teams a chance.
Yep.
For clubs like Villa's and Everton's, big, massive football clubs in this league at the moment, it's just getting further and further away, the idea of... Doesn't help when you're losing at home to Stevenage, by the way, Villa fans. But you're just getting further and further away from having the chance to win a domestic competition. It's getting harder and harder. What about for clubs like Brentford's, Fulham's, who, with respect to, and I'm not mean to pick these two sides, but we've seen it a lot in the past, where you have teams, and it always does my nut, you get teams who are like mid-table in the Premier League, they're perfectly safe, and in third round, the FA Cup rocks round, they go, we're gonna play a second team, and they lose and they go out. The season's effectively over. And I just think, what have you done?
Yeah.
What's the point? What's your existence and stuff? So I'd hope, I would have no problem with that. The way it's going, I think I would rather Tottenham didn't compete in it than put a development team in it. I think that would be my take, if that's the way it's got to go. And then if we didn't qualify for Europe, and then fine, so we compete in it.
And you got a good chance of winning it and getting back into it. I do think if it increases the chances of spreading trophies a little bit more, and also the prize being Europe the season after, I agree. What's your view with the FA Cup? I was looking at it at the weekend. So as it stands, based on the fact that there's a couple of replays now still, Liverpool, Wolves. What's the all other Premier League tie that drew?
There isn't.
So that's the only all Premier League tie that drew.
There are 6 replays.
Yeah.
And here's part of the conversation. I would argue that of the 12 teams who have FA Cup third round replays, 9 of them don't want it.
So my maths was 7 Premier League teams going out, roughly. Or there will be after Liverpool Wolves is finished.
I'd need to go back to the plan.
I think it's definitely 6 or 7.
At least.
Yeah, I think Forest, Bournemouth,
I think it can only be
Villa, Newcastle, Brentford, one of Liverpool, Wolves, and there was one other.
It's a maximum of 9 in the 5th round. I know that.
Premier League teams.
Yeah, maximum of 9.
So have they done the draw? I didn't check yesterday. Who did we get?
You got Man City away.
Yeah, lovely.
I always say that to you. You got Derby away, mate.
Derby away. Might even
go
visit my mates up in Derby. Sit in the Derby end. You can buy tickets on the day there, I think. So I think it was interesting to me how many Premier League teams are going to get knocked out. Because if we can get down to like only say 6 or 7 in the 5th round, that's interesting now suddenly. And we're still in it at that point. I'm like, okay, game on. We can go on and win this now. If there's still like 12, 14 Premier League teams, you feel like what's the point for the rest of the guys as well that are involved in the competition? So I like to see the Premier League teams, some of them, get knocked out early. There's a argument that you could work both ways. A lot of people were saying give the FA Cup winners a Champions League spot.
I'm massively in support of that.
And if they do, a lot of teams will take it more seriously. If they all take it more seriously, there's less chance of you and me winning it because there's teams that are better than us in it. So I'm kind of like...
We're not winning it as it is. It doesn't.
I want to win a trophy, so let's make it as easy as possible to win that trophy by letting other teams field weakened sides and let them go out early, fine. But also, I want the competition to be taken seriously, so give it a proper prize. The cash at the end of it, we've seen with the Carabao Cup, and God knows what the FA Cup winners win, but it's not going to be massively more. It's not enough to make it worthwhile. But trust me, Europe is such a big deal for some of the bigger clubs that they will take it seriously.
Oh, you could imagine those on the brink of top 4. Like, I mean, would Newcastle have picked a stronger team at Sheffield Wednesday if it's Champions League at the end of the season? I don't know. It's very difficult to say, in fairness. You could make a case that if it was Champions League place for the FA Cup winners, that perhaps it would be even harder for your Villas and Evertons and clubs like that to try and win the competition because the bigger clubs take it even more seriously. But I think it's the offer of the dream, isn't it?
Yeah.
How is a Villa or an Everton currently
getting the Premier League? Getting the Champions League.
Going to get in the Champions League.
Not going to happen.
It's hard enough to get in the bloody Europa League.
Yeah.
How are they going to get in the Champions League? Give these clubs a chance. And one of the arguments that always... This isn't going to happen, by the way. They won't. the Premier League aren't going to give up one of their places for the FA, right? It's not going to happen. One of the arguments always given to me is, you couldn't have, people say, right, Wigan won it in 2013. You couldn't have Wigan in the Champions League.
Why not?
What exactly that? Why not?
Why not? They are bigger than some of the clubs that play in the Champions League now.
I don't know about that.
I'm talking about some of these fringe clubs. Somewhere like Bruges, for example.
No, they're not.
In terms of attendance.
I mean, Wigan is a very small football club.
In terms of attendance.
With respect.
How many do they get into the JD Sports or whatever it's called?
It's half empty every week.
Yeah, when they were in the Premier League?
It still wasn't full every week.
No, but what, 20,000? I'm only measuring,
18s,
in terms of size of club,
average.
I'm only measuring in terms of attendance. Obviously, these other clubs are title winners in their own respective countries and so on and so on. But some of these
Bruges
clubs...
are a bigger club than Wigan, if that's your argument.
Okay, so there must be some smaller clubs in the Champions League.
We will get clubs who qualify
places.
like Victoria Pilsens and stuff like that with respect to... Yes, they're smaller than every Premier League club, put it that way. Put it that way.
So why shouldn't a club like that? And also then give me the last 30 years and tell me which FA Cup winners you'd consider as not worthy of the Champions League.
The argument that people say is exactly that, which we said, why? People say, you can't have Wigan in the Champions League. And we literally just like, why? They'll destroy our coefficient because they'll bomb out in the first round. Okay, so they'll bomb out in the first round. Listen, England's coefficient place is not under threat. In any case, they're guaranteed 4 places now. England, Spain, Italy, Germany guaranteed it, right? So there's no stress. We're gonna drop. Our coefficient's gonna be so bad if Wigan are in the Champions League. No, everybody deserves the right to have the opportunity and dream. That's what we always say, right? One of our arguments between the original format idea of the Champions League or the Super League is this closed football idea. Now, fuck that. Everyone deserves an opportunity. In any case, unfortunately, as much as I'd like it, the FA Cup is not going to get a Champions League place. Where there are, of course, continued questions around the FA Cup is around replays, what you'd mentioned. So I just wanted to highlight the 12 ties that are going to go to a replay in the third round this year. So you got West Brom, Chesterfield. Right, West Brom don't want that. Chesterfield will do, right? They'll look at an 10 to 12,000, say, attendance at the Hawthorns, and they'll get 45% at the gate. Brilliant for them, great. And obviously the beauty with that is there's no cost to Chesterfield, right? All the cost still comes out of West Brom stewarding, policing, etc., etc. Accrington and Boreham Wood, perhaps they're happy to have a replay because Accrington will be happy to have the gate receipts. Boreham Wood, it's an additional tie, potential to get through. Wolves, Liverpool don't want to replay. Wigan, Luton don't want to replay. Swansea, Bristol City don't want to replay. Leeds, Cardiff don't want to replay. So essentially, no one in the top 2 tiers wants replays. In fact, I had a conversation with Jamie Roberts, who's a Stoke fan from the EFL podcast, on a Patreon pod I did prior to Christmas. And he was like, I just can't bother with the FA Cup. Literally got no interest in it. It's a pain in the arse. We've got 46 league fixtures. We ain't going to win the competition. Attendances are going to be lower if we're at home, etc. What's the point? That's how a lot of the championship teams now deem the FA Cup as an inconvenience. So the top 2 division clubs don't want replays. Now, the lower league clubs, of course, absolutely do. But my argument has always been this. Look at Stevenage yesterday, right? Couple of minutes to go, 1-0 down at Villa. They equalise. Dream potential tie of replay at Broadhall Way. Guaranteed, almost guaranteed TV coverage as well on top of the gate receipts. Now, remember, when they're at home, they only get 45%.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and said, well, what if the average spend is £25, let's say? Let's say it's 20 quid a ticket. Someone buys something to eat. Let's say average 25 quid. There'll be some kids who'll be cheaper and stuff. Average 25 quid, right? You got 45% of that. They'll make about £87,000 roughly in terms of the gate. And then you can throw in probably around about another 100,000 for TV coverage. Okay. But them winning yesterday put £100,000 in the bank for them straight away. And now they're getting the gate receipts again because they've got Sunderland at home in round 4. So the argument always is, the replays are better because the lower league clubs lose out on funds, etc. But whatever happened to the glory of winning? Yesterday, if Stevenage hadn't got the winner, they would have, if it had to be settled on the day, Villa at extra time at Villa Park against 10 men. and now they've got their, obviously didn't go to extra time, but surely the story of the weekend was them winning at Villa Park.
Yep.
So the chances are, if it goes to a replay, they're probably going to get beat, aren't they? You don't normally get two good shots at this, right? So, yeah, it would be nice for them to have Villa at home. But now they've got Sunderland coming, and they're doing really well in League Two. Maybe they'll beat Sunderland. Maybe they'll then get 150 grand of prize money. Then maybe they'll have Manchester United at their place in round 5, for example. So the argument that always the replays have got to be there for the lower league clubs. Unfortunately, I think we should consider that finishing the game on the day gives a lower league club a greater chance of progression.
Yeah.
And we should consider that. Now, I know most people lower down the pyramid will say, got to have replays. Fine. Unfortunately, with the restructure of the Champions League, one of the things that's going to change is, so the idea is that in this 36-team league, 1 to 8 qualifies automatically for the last 16. And 9th to 23rd will play in a playoff round. A bit like yourselves and Arsenal have jumped around in Europas this year. Manchester United are having to play Barcelona because they finished second in the group.
Will that be a home and away?
It'll be a home and away.
The two games.
It will probably be
January.
in late January, early February. Which, what's that going to fuck up? Replays. FA Cup 4th round replays is going to be a major, major problem. For if you have a team that's in that playoff round, and it's not just the Champions League, it will be the other two competitions as well, as FA Cup 4th round replay, the chances are it's just not going to work on the schedule currently. So we've lost, as the years have gone on, we've kept losing replays. 99 was the last FA Cup semi-final. Quarterfinals went in the noughties. The FA Cup 5th round replay, the last one was, I was at Tottenham and Rochdale in 2018, I think it was. 4th round replays will go. FA Cup 3rd round replays you've got a chance of holding on to. And I think the FA is clinging on to try and have that. Realistically, once you hit the 4th round, how many League One teams and below are going to be left?
Yep.
Is the realistic answer. If you take an answer like Walsall have just joined, Derby have got yourselves, but Derby shouldn't be at that level. Let's say Walsall against Leicester. Okay, so if Walsall get a draw with Leicester and they go to the King Power and they get 45% of the attendance in the 4th round, great. But this is becoming a rarer and rarer thing. And I think we will unfortunately lose 4th round FA Cup replays. Would you just scrap them completely?
Yeah.
But we approach that as Premier League fans, right? Where they're a pain in the arse and a headache. You're going to Derby. My team's going to Preston in the 4th round. My take is finished out on the night.
Yeah, I'd rather just get the game done. I'm not too worried about the replay. I mean, we scored in the 79th, 80th minute, and as the closer it was going towards the end, there was more like, shit, we're going to have to just play them again at home. I'd rather it was just dealt with on the day. I mean, we talk about the magic of the cup. You went to your game at home. Did you feel like it was the magic of the cup? No, but it was nice that there were 9,000 Portsmouth fans there, and they made a lot of noise. They made it a far better atmosphere than it would have been, because obviously away fans in the cup get far more ticket allocation helps. And stuff. I didn't feel the magic of the cup at the weekend.
But it's 3rd round of the cup. No,
I watched it. It doesn't help that the game was fairly uninspiring, but with the cup competition being knockout, you'd think, right, you've got to win it on the day, so kind of go for it. Neither team particularly were going for it. It was more a case of let's not lose than let's win, and it wasn't a inspiring atmosphere. It sounded all right in the ground, but obviously that's because of the volume of West Ham fans that are allowed into the G-Tech or whatever. Yeah, it didn't feel like the magic of the cup, particularly for me.
No, and unfortunately it's gone that way. A little bit like what I said, it's almost like if you're not going to win it, go out early. Get rid of the headache, get rid of... The problem is the scheduling. For the teams that are in Europe like us, the scheduling, can just end up so brutal that it becomes a headache that even you might land in the quarterfinal and it's like, oh, we've got to play a heavily rotated team. Round 5 is a midweek in between weekends of Premier League, or in somebody's case, a League Cup final and Premier League the weekend after. And you just know that you could end up where some teams won't have a fixture in the midweek. This is interesting. Won't have a fixture in the midweek before or after the fourth round of the Cup. So you might end up playing quite a strong team. But then you end up in the next round, the fifth round, you go, well, the schedule's too tight. I'm going to rest the team here. It's midweek. That doesn't really make sense, does it?
No. If you're trying to win, you're trying to win.
So, unfortunately, I think fourth round replays will go from 24-25 onwards. Third round replays are very much in the balance. I think the idea is that first and second round replays and the preliminaries and all that, there will still be replays, I think. What's in it at the first and second round replay level for rather than just finishing it on the day? We know some clubs who can have long distance journeys who will potentially lose out. One suggestion that's been floated by a few people, and this isn't from the top, but people are suggesting it as an idea. How would you feel about the FA Cup just being completed in a 3-week period?
Nah, I think spread it over the season.
So how would you feel if they said, right, do you know what? After the New Year's Day fixtures, the rest of January is just dedicated just for the FA Cup. Final will be at the end of January, third round the start of January. You go weekend, midweek.
But teams that go what are Newcastle going to do the rest of the month? Nothing.
Well, there is that.
What are Villa going to do the rest of the month? Nothing.
Well,
it doesn't make sense.
Newcastle will go to Saudi Arabia and make some money.
It doesn't make sense to me from that kind of point of view. If you go out early, then you've got a month off, whereas teams that go towards the end are now disadvantaged in the league. It doesn't make sense.
The other problem with doing that in January is weather.
Yeah.
Forest Green and Birmingham was postponed at the weekend. You know, the smaller the club, the more chance with respect that you're going to have a postponement at this time of year because of weather. And I don't think... A few people said, can you do it at the end of the season? So finish the Premier League at the end of April and then just have the FA Cup in May. What about if you finish the Premier League season at April and then you've got Champions League finals, second weekend of June, and you go out early in the FA Cup, so you've got no football match for 4 or 5 weeks and then play a Champions League final? Well, that's not right, is it?
No, I don't like that particularly.
No, I don't think that idea works. The FA Cup needs to stay as close to as traditional as is possible. But I think, unfortunately, because of UEFA's scheduling and the sheer volume of fixtures, I think FA Cup replays, unfortunately, is going to go for the majority. I've also heard people suggest that in the EFL trophy, which is the FA trophy, which is non-league FA Cup, if you will, they're allowed to choose. The two teams decide if prior to the first game if there'll be a replay or not. It's up to the two clubs. I don't know who decides when they disagree. I want a replay. I don't know who decides.
If any one team wants a replay, there's going to be a replay.
There's a few people said, could you do that now? But let's have the example of, let's say, Liverpool are playing Accrington Stanley in the FA Cup. You think Liverpool are going to agree to the possibility of the replay? They're going to finish this today. So I don't see where the lower league club's ever going to win in terms of that kind of agreement. It's always going to fall on what the big club decides, unfortunately, isn't it?
Let's talk about the Community Shield.
Just very briefly on this one. So that's part of the discussion and dialogue, is the idea of what are you going to do with it. There's been some suggestion of moving it towards the middle of the season. And the thinking behind that is because the European competitions are starting earlier, could you start the Premier League season earlier? And then you might be able to manipulate the European teams playing in the Carabao Cup earlier, for example. I don't know. Or playing perhaps midweek fixtures in August in the Premier League. I don't know why we stopped doing that in recent years anyway. I used to like that. You'd start the Premier League season weekend, midweek, weekend. Bang, bang, bang. Whereas it feels like most midweeks, because someone like yourselves will have like Europa Conference League playoff or something, we can't have fixtures. We'll just let West Ham catch up on a fixture later on, is always my take on that. There's some suggestion about moving it to the middle of the season. A few people like Todd Bolly have obviously suggested scrapping it and having this all-star game, for example, which I think would be more of a kind of an end-of-season event. That's not under consideration as far as I'm aware. What the major talks are, it would seem, is what's happened in other leagues is moving it as a showpiece game to be played overseas.
Okay.
Which I think then you could have earlier in the pre-season schedule.
Yeah.
You know how I feel about taking games out of our country, the idea of the 39th game being overseas and stuff like that. Nonsense. Would I really care if Tottenham got to the Community Shield because they'd won the FA Cup with the Premier League and they go, that's in Japan now, for example? Or, no, I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered. I'm sure clubs like Man City are always getting pillared. Oh, you don't fill out at Wembley. Yeah, but they go 4 times every year and it's a long journey and they're probably sick of the place. I don't think they'd be that bothered. And I think that's a way to appease people overseas. They can bid for it. You know, Australia, Japan, China, USA, all these places can bid to host a Community Shield if they want. Fine, you can have a game from England. The danger with that is it becomes the start of something, is what I think people are concerned about. But yeah, I wouldn't be bothered. And then I think you can have it earlier in pre-season. No one really treats that game seriously.
You'd be happy to miss it.
I wouldn't give a toss about the Community Shield. Okay. I mean, look, if Tottenham got to the Community Shield and it's played at Wembley, I'm going, obviously. Yeah. But if I knew that particular fixture was being played overseas, I'm not bothered. Yep. And I think that would be the take of most football
It's like an
fans.
away game at the end of the day at that point, isn't it? You miss plenty of away games.
The thing is as well, it's not, you don't really care if you win or lose, even the teams competing on it. You know, it's one you can say, oh, we won a trophy this year. It's Community Shield. No one really cares. It's the last friendly before the season starts. So could you have that in like mid-July where City play Liverpool in New York or something? Yeah, sure. I don't think anyone's got too much of a problem with that. So that might be part of the discussions as well.
Interesting. Listeners, thank you for joining us for this People's Poll and voting as well. If you don't know where you can vote, then you need to head over to twitter.com/Planet FPL pod, where you'll be able to find James. I'm sure majority of you do follow James already. What's the plan this week before the football recommences at the weekend?
You have to remember the plan.
Recommences on Thursday.
I will quote Gary Mantle, our Chelsea correspondent, put on our Slack this morning. I don't think I've ever looked forward to a clash of the correspondents as much as tomorrow's. It's Everton versus Southampton, but you don't want their FPL assets. This ain't going to be an FPL chat, but Everton v Southampton. This is a huge 6-pointer already in the football season. I'm going to record with Sean and Matt today. Between recording today and posting it tomorrow, one of them might be out without a manager. It's a real mess at those two clubs at the moment. That's tomorrow, Sky Wednesday. Thursday is said, extended podcast. We're going to have a real look once these Carabao Cup fixtures are done and we know the semi-final draw. Look at probabilities around sort of game week 25, game week 28, potential doubles that could be arranged following game week 20. Map out if perhaps next week is best for triple captaincy, for example. Looking at the idea of bench boost later in the season. We're going to cover all that on Thursday once we've got the full picture and schedule. Mad stat for you, Suj. Carabao Cup final, game week 25. FA Cup quarterfinals calls blanks, game week 28. Currently, we only know 2 definite fixtures in 25, which is the Carabao Cup final date. Despite the fact we're at quarter-final stage. We've only had 1 round of the FA Cup and we know for sure 3 fixtures.
Wow.
In blank game week 28. Incredible. And we've had that the last couple of years, only been 4 fixtures. We've got 3 confirmed already.
Wow.
So that might be a bit bigger than normal. And as we'll cover on Thursday, I think pre-results you'd have gone, I'll use a free hit to cover that week. The teams that are going to be playing in 28 might not be necessary. So that might mean a change of strategy for people. I'm going to stream early on Friday morning because it's a Friday deadline as well. So I'm going to do an Ask James stream Friday morning. Patreon podcast, which is available to all patrons this week. Q&A today. Tomorrow, Suj, Money in Football. Do you know what we're covering?
No, I haven't looked at the schedule yet.
Well, this is all on you, mate. We're going to be covering Morecambe Football Club and a potential takeover of them, which involves a reported 20-year-old millionaire who might not be a millionaire. Tyson Fury's name getting mentioned quite a lot. Something smells very fishy around Morecambe at the moment. And that's not just because they're nicknamed the Shrimps. That's Money in Football tomorrow. Wednesday is Tottenham. Thursday, I've got a quiz and the theme is VAR controversies. And Friday will be our differential show, Game Week 20 preview, which will also include a look back on the Thursday night fixture between Fulham and Chelsea.
Lovely, jubbly. If you want to get access to all that additional content that James mentioned for patrons, you know where to go. Patreon.com/Planet FPL. You only need to join at basic tier this month to get all of the intermediate pods. If you join at intermediate tier, you get all of the advanced videos as well, which is another 20 bits of content for the month as well. And it obviously helps keep the lights on, support the show, and keep us going. That's patreon.com/Planet FPL. We'd love to have you over there, part of our Slack community, and obviously there's prize leagues and other benefits as well. But other than that, Enjoy your Monday. Stay safe. Look after yourselves. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man child.